Hello all and welcome to yet another video focusing on the 2021 Mortal Kombat movie. Now, this video is in part a response to the conundrums that Filmento pointed out in the Mortal Kombat movie. And the other part of it is how to fix some of its various deep-rooted issues and make it a better movie. And many of these are really a part of its writing, of its narrative structure, but also choices that were made as a part of the production as a whole. Now, I enjoyed the movie and I enjoy the channel Filmento's criticism, so I say this with respect to Filmento as a critic and to the people who put in their blood, sweat, and tears on that movie. Because I enjoy both of these things, I think that this creative critique should be taken as good-spirited and in good faith. I wish them all very, very well. Now, I'm going to use Filmento's Anatomy of a Failure as a jumping off point to get into my critiques and my suggestions to improve said movie. And the video in question I will link down below, and I will already say its title here, Mortal Kombat, How to Get Finished by the Video Game Movie Curse. And he asserts that the movie's failings, in the end, stem from it focusing too much on the video game and not enough on the movie. I completely disagree. I think they made several narrative choices that clearly indicated they were focused on making a movie that would appeal to a wider audience rather than making a video game movie, and in doing so, they ended up with a film that had difficulty resonating with either the mainstream wider audience they were looking for and with hardcore fans of the video game. It sort of met with a kind of meh from both on a wider scale, becoming fun but ultimately forgettable. In short, it was the reduction of the core elements of Mortal Kombat to simple references and, hey, do you get this joke, rather than emphasizing the narrative significance of many of the Mortal Kombat characters' personalities, backstories, and actions that leads their narrative to being lackluster. I don't think the studio valued Mortal Kombat as much more than a surface source material with a few references and jokes and names that they could do with what they wanted. And this, in the end, alienates some Mortal Kombat fans and leads them to fail to see the narrative universals in the story that would also appeal to a wider audience that don't play fighting games. In opposition to Filmento, I argue that this succumbs to the video game curse because it does not treat the video game with the respect it deserves, and it doesn't treat it as more than a source of references. Ergo, it has a narrative problem that is made all the worse by the fact that they did not commit to the changes they made in the movie and executed them poorly. One of Filmento's initial assertions is that as a video game movie, this film is a slave to its video game origins and thus has to neglect character, emotions, and even stakes in its attempt to replicate the style and basic crux of the Mortal Kombat plotline. In this, I think he gets it half right. The movie does sacrifice character development a lot of the time just to push the plot forward. Some of the fights have no narrative meaning or stakes behind them, and in many ways they are clumsily fit into the story. And even the ones that serve as the climax to the film are almost more of a montage than an actual set of fights that we should care about, in part because we know how it's going to go. And in very many cases, a lot of these characters don't have reasons to be fighting other than, well, our side's at war, so let's do it. This is not because of the enslavement to the source material, or being calf-roped into it, or something like that. This is actually simply the fault of bad writing. And many action movies that are not video game movies have had to deal with the same problem. How do you mix the need for fight scenes with also having to balance out things like character and narrative stakes? And different action movies, from Bloodsport and Snake and Eagle's Shadow to Fast and Furious and RoboCop, have had to navigate this terrain. In many cases, what separates a good action movie from a bad action movie is not just the fight scenes. It's the story you tell around them that sets up the reason for these fight scenes to matter. And this is an element of good storytelling as well as an element of creating a good fighting game story. And the Mortal Kombat games have honed this over the years. So if you want a lesson for how to set up significant fight scenes, as well as examples of how to do it wrong, perhaps looking to the games more as a primer would be useful. Consider what started as a simple blurb backstory for fighters telling you why they were at the tournament as an excuse for their presence in the game, and eventually evolved into the dominant cinematic storytelling of the genre. Mortal Kombat 9, 10, and 11 are all cases where they have a in-depth story setting up the reasons for these fights, and sometimes with these they fail to make them significant. In other cases, I am chewing on my nails going, what's going to happen next? And some of this is translated successfully to the movie. Why do Scorpion and Sub-Zero hate each other so much? Well, Scorpion's family is murdered in front of him by Sub-Zero, or a man he thinks is Sub-Zero, in the canon Mortal Kombat and in Scorpion's Revenge. Hanzo Hasashi lost everything to the Lin Kuei, and to Sub-Zero in particular, so it's very personal for him. His son, his wife, dead because of Sub-Zero, or Quan Chi posed as Sub-Zero, and then you have that long rivalry between their clans. So there's some political and historical background there as well. Oh, then there's the fact that Sub-Zero's the one that killed him and made him this hellspawn, who in some cases ends up as a servant of evil. In some very humiliating cases, the servant of the very man who killed his family. Oh yeah, that's narrative stakes, and you see that in the beginning of the movie. It's a phenomenal good scene. So what do we do with that in the Mortal Kombat movie? We give you 7 to 8 minutes of fun, and then go, alright, it's over. And we move on. And Scorpion doesn't come into play other than as background visions and some sort of narrative exposition. You're a descendant of this person who should matter to you, but we both know that he doesn't because you're so far removed from this that your ancestor's relationship to Sub-Zero doesn't mean anything to you, but might to him. Okay, that's nice. We only pull out Scorpion at the very end, which is awesome because of that rescue scene, and that he gets to bring back some of the lines like they were yesterday for him, and maybe they were, but Scorpion didn't go on a journey. He starts it, and then he goes off at the very end and shows up with this full armor and set of powers, none of which we saw him earn, and only has narrative significance now because of its relationship to Cole. Because the movie is so focused on Cole as an audience surrogate, it fails to develop one of its key characters, Scorpion. So Scorpion's reappearance both denies Cole a significant narrative point if Cole had defeated Sub-Zero, and denies Scorpion any real role in how the story progresses, just popping in as sort of a deus ex machina, whose resurrection is not even fully explained by the situation. Hey, you've got this blade. Oh, it suddenly revived Scorpion. Why did it do so now? Oh, we needed it to. If the movie were only made to appeal to Mortal Kombat fans and people who wanted it to be like the game, Scorpion would have fought Sub-Zero on his own. Scorpion would have had a more significant narrative role, whether as a hero, anti-hero, or even villain. Scorpion would have mattered more than a guy who shows up at the end for a sort of aha moment with his get over here catchphrase and then help Cole defeat the guy. He becomes a bit player in his own story and rivalry who only exists because of his iconic appearance and catchphrase that most moviegoers might know through cultural osmosis. The movie is attempting to please video game fans in the cheapest, easiest way possible while focusing on what they see as the wider audience. But here's the problem. The wider audience isn't going to care either because the story setup for Cole wasn't that good. So you fail to establish the new guy we're supposed to care about, and you treat the old guy cheaply. That's a failure on both ends. Which brings me to one of the biggest issues with this movie, and a side joke for anyone who's played WWE 2K19, Black Hole Cole. This character exists because the filmmakers or the studio, one or the other, I presume the studio, did not have faith in the Mortal Kombat franchise and in Liu Kang as a hero. We are provided with Cole as a blank slate character that can have things explained to him. Emphasis on blank slate and explain. This character is written so poorly, I get bored out of my mind anytime he is the focus of the story. There is no reason by the game's logic he should be there. It is only because of studio or directorial mandate. Thus, we have this person added in here who has to win over fans of the game and moviegoers at the same time. That second group being the group that he was created to appeal to. Unfortunately, he doesn't do anything that a blank slate audience surrogate character would have to do in order to get the audience's sympathy or interest. He blows the traditional narrative purpose of this character. He is a hodgepodge of tropes that should work, but don't, because they lack any of the heart and creativity that made them work in the other source material that made them popular. Look at this fighter who's not in his prime anymore, but his determination and willingness to take pain and punishment is what shows he has heart. Well, thank you, Rocky and its robot remake, Real Steel. What about all the other character development that makes that matter and makes sense in relation to him? Not present? Okay, moving on. Then there's his family. Ah, the trick of using a family to make an action hero sympathetic. You can either kill them off to create a sympathetic anti-hero or put them in danger to give the hero his motivation for acting. Of course, there are more tricks than just these, but these are the ones used in the movie. We already used the killing them off in the beginning with Scorpion, who, being a 90s anti-hero, kinda gets away with this by being grandfathered into the claws. But Cole gets to have his family put into danger 3 times. Once to show he's being chased, twice for Goro, and 3 times for Sub-Zero. I mean, the first time I can accept, and that last time, well, it's meant to be a mirror of the beginning, where, oh look, they're frozen just like Sub-Zero did before, and it's Sub-Zero's favorite tactic. Ah, yeah, that works. But why do we need the Goro one? Oh, to give him his powers? We've used this trick 3 times now. Come on. What's worse, they're thoroughly undeveloped. We already have one underdeveloped family getting killed off in the beginning, but they were in the beginning, so they didn't really have that much time to be developed. Even though I think the 2009 Star Trek movie shows you how to develop a early introduced family and then kill them off in the first few minutes of a show, let's just go with the idea that they don't want to put in that effort. You could at least put in some effort with the family we're going to put in danger 3 times. The closest one of them comes to having any personality is the daughter, and that's when she coaches her father. This seems to establish a positive relationship between the two, but we do nothing with it, so what does it matter? We show just enough to fool the unobservant audience member into going, ah, she's a cool kid, and then we don't bother again. We expect the sympathy to be enough. Now, the tough guy with a heart of gold that's shown through his relationship with his family has worked many times in the past, and I'm sure it will work many times more. But we have to make them people, or in some way interesting, and here that never occurs. No, I don't want them to receive attention that could be better spent focused on someone else, but if you want us to care about them at all as more than a plot device, you've got to develop them. Either A, bring them along to the hideout, or B, get them out of most of the movie till you need them at the very, very end. And I have to bring up the issue with their being frozen at the end of the movie, because somehow they're still alive when we're treated to Scorpion's frozen family, and he treats them as though they're already dead. Now, maybe, because I see some blood on them in the beginning, they were stabbed before or while they were frozen, meaning they couldn't be saved. And somehow Cole's family could be, despite being frozen for the entirety of a fight scene. That's the best I got. Otherwise, why are they allowed to be saved, but Scorpions aren't? Because the plot needs it to happen that way. And the plot needing it to happen that way is pretty much how the entire movie goes. The writers didn't seem to put in enough motivation and proper thought into the characters to make things happen a certain way, so events have to unfold inorganically. Also wrong with Cole, his powers. They are pretty much a power set that we're already familiar with from the Black Panther and Sebastian Shaw from the X-Men, but he does nothing with it that's very interesting, and besides his fight with Goro, it doesn't seem to matter much at all. And indeed, it's not really what kills Goro, it's those tonfas that come along with the suit of armor. Does it really matter against Mileena or Sub-Zero very much? Nope. And the closest I've found to this power having any significance with his character is, aha, he used to get beat up all the time, and this is his toughness given physical form. But that's the most connection I can make, and again, it only works when the plot requires it to. And it's not used to any other narrative purpose other than to show he's got powers. It's not used to make a villain more threatening and make us wonder how on earth can we beat him, like with Shaw, or like Black Panther, to show us, hey, this stuff is amazing, and later to make us fear any villain who has the same technology. Apparently other fighters can deal with it just fine by dint of the plot needing them to, and it also has led to a meme now of people joking, Cole's power is literally plot armor. Yes it is. It really is. I've now started to see it in the comment pages under a lot of YouTube videos relating to Mortal Kombat, and I'm sure it's a motivational or demotivational somewhere, somehow. They don't even do anything interesting with Cole's background as an MMA fighter. Now, this could be incredibly significant because of what MMA is. A lot of early 90s interdisciplinary fighting tournaments that focused on a variety of styles were quickly dominated by a small subgroup of those. Practitioners of things like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tended to dominate. Strikers who learned things like boxing, karate, and kickboxing were often very vulnerable to submission grappling and weren't ready to deal with these techniques. Now, as these competitions became more common, they would cross-train in multiple styles, both striking and grappling. Mixed martial arts was a name that had cosmetic and commercial meaning, originally appearing in 1993, but it quickly began to refer to not just the combat sport, but the phenomenon that came about because of it, with fighters intermixing a lot of the styles, taking what worked best from each, and creating a highly objective, almost scientific process of practical fighting in that what worked dominated and what didn't was discarded. This is very different from traditional styles of martial arts that emphasize form as much as function. Unlike traditional martial arts, there is a great deal of information sharing between competitors and trainers. Certainly, it's publicly presented as a different kind of animal than many traditional martial arts were during the big martial arts boom and craze when everyone was opening their dojo and trying to market themselves as the inheritors of some secret whatever. A lot of modern kinesiology goes into understanding how to effectively build a fighter and what strategies can be used. MMA is a rigorous act of intelligence and skill building as much as it is a sport. And it's all about the pragmatism and the winning. And this has led to a great deal of cultural, let's say, conflict between some martial arts practitioners who study traditional martial arts and MMA competitors who focus on more pragmatic values. Note, I'm oversimplifying a little bit. Alright, more than a little bit, but I want to fit this in here to talk about something I consider important to Mortal Kombat's storyline, so let's get a move on. There is a great deal of cultural mysticism that has been built up around the martial arts, particularly Eastern martial arts. And this has been popularized by the martial arts craze that came out of World War II and, more importantly, the big Chinese martial arts cinema boom. This was fueled by action films, exoticism, comics, and all sorts of things that created this idea of an almost mystical, all right, let's just call it outright mystical, force that could be developed by these martial artists. It became a fantasy that people could believe in real life. And there are videos of people practicing supposedly ki-based techniques that in actuality are more the actions of people like faith healers, magicians, and crank psychics. Indeed, these supposed ki masters have performed incredibly poorly in physical confrontation. And when China attempted to politicize its traditional martial arts styles as a form of nationalism, it has led to a bit of conflict with the more pragmatic, materialist mixed martial arts community. A great example of this sort of conflict can be found in Shu Xiaodong, or is it Shu Xiaodong? Shu Xiaodong? I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his name, so I'm probably butchering it. He is a mixed martial artist that grew rather irate with what he saw as fraud within the martial arts community, and he wanted to show that this modern development in fighting styles is superior to a lot of these old, in many cases overhyped techniques. And he's made something of a career lately of defeating grandmasters in their art. The Chinese government has not taken very kindly to this and has made a campaign of harassment against him one of its priorities. If you want to look more into that, I encourage you to research Shu as Xiaodong or Xiaodong. Again, it's his last name that gives me trouble. There are a lot of YouTubers that cover this. You can look in the newspapers about him. I'm not sure how many of you read newspapers anymore. There are magazine articles with him in them. Anyway, bringing it back to Mortal Kombat is very much the inheritor of the mystic martial arts craze, and it buys into a lot of those notions of the martial arts granting characters superhuman abilities through things like chi and superior training and faith and things like that. So what might it mean for a part of the very materialistic, science-focused MMA community to run into this world where the mystical arts are very much real and alive? Now, the movie dodges this entirely by making the Mortal Kombat powers basically superpowers. They're arcana given to them by the symbols, and they must unlock them. So they're basically superheroes now rather than mystic martial arts fighters. They're just superheroes who know the martial arts. Do we do anything with this clash of old mystic martial arts tropes with a modern mixed martial arts fighter? Nope, we just use the mixed martial arts background to explain how he can fight. That's it. Our chance to do anything deeper? Thrown away. Indeed, you could have done some fun things with Cole trying to apply rational thought to these abilities and his approach to Mortal Kombat, and make that one of his standout traits. He's a cynic, and someone who can make reasonable deductions that lead to him to defeating much more dangerous and seemingly powerful opponents, because he has the calm to think through a fight and the wherewithal and cleverness to find solutions to his superior opponent's powers. This would also give him a virtue that the audience can value. Of course, then the writers would have to get as creative as the character, and that can be a problem. So no, we're just going to use it as a background trait and not do anything with it. You can see why I'm looking at Cole as just a massive mistake. They should have saved this actor for someone else. He doesn't even fulfill the role as an audience surrogate completely, because the audience surrogate also must be the person who expresses the views of the audience, and he doesn't even do that very well. Indeed, he seems to express very few views at all other than to make fun of the K in combat. He's there for us to explain things to, but he doesn't even earn those explanations. It's not like Watson, who went around with Sherlock Holmes and aided Sherlock in his endeavors, and therefore got the benefit of Sherlock's explanations. This is not someone who has fought his way through a catacomb to find a mystery. This is not even someone who worked to solve a puzzle. It's just here, here, here. Cole doesn't really earn the information, and therefore neither do we as the audience. This last one is one of Filmento's points against this character in the movie, and I have to agree with it. However, I would like to point out that all of these problems are not the result of it being a video game movie. All of these are issues that the studio added to the existing lore because they didn't have faith in the existing lore from the game. So they added what they thought would be a bridge, but instead just made the whole chasm problem worse. Their attempts to make a good movie over a good video game movie resulted in neither being exactly fully fulfilled. There is an example of a good movie choosing to be a good movie over a good video game movie, and that is the first of the Resident Evil film series. It is a terrible representation of the video game. It is a piss-poor video game movie in terms of how it treats the source material. It is basically just a setup for Alice to go have an adventure for 6 movies. The characters in the movies are just like, hey, do you remember this cool character? They're not going to do anything. The Mary Sue's going to steal all of their thunder. Hey, do you like these monsters from the video game? We'll throw them in there, but we won't even get their origins right. They're just cannon fodder for these things. And I will say I enjoyed them as movies up until 6. 6 is just garbage. Totally garbage. And they really steadily declined from the first one in quality, but there was still something fun in each of them, even if you're familiar with the formula and were ready for the video game you enjoyed to be abused. The first movie, which has none of the video game characters in it, is still a well-made movie. Yes, it is based so loosely on the source material that if it didn't have the umbrella symbol on it and the liquor, there would be no recognizing it. But you know, the character who has no connection to the games that they introduced in that movie, she's sort of interesting, and she matters narratively. We are with her on the journey to recover her memories, and her memories were narratively significant to what happened, and her skills and leadership and personality are all narratively significant to the story as a whole. And there is a solid story. So it is a fun movie, despite being a poor video game movie. So we have seen some success in the introduction of a new character to a franchise to introduce people to it. But we've never seen that work in favor of the video game side. It's almost always done out of desire for a mainstream audience. And specifically with Mortal Kombat, I found this to be a truly unnecessary and counterproductive step. Back to another of Filmento's problems, the fights lacking narrative significance. He's correct on a lot of these. Some of them do matter, like the one at the beginning that sets up the need for Hanzo Hasashi's vengeance needs to happen for there to be Scorpion. The one at the very end with the captured family, that has some serious stakes to it. But other times, there is no reason for the fight to occur, or the excuse is flimsy, or the end result of it is completely nullified by something that happens just after it, or doesn't happen, as in it doesn't matter at all. In an action movie, yes, I say action movie, a writer and director must work out how to give each fight meaning. Otherwise, your action movie isn't going to matter. I think this is a part of the problem with the Expendables series, as they increasingly paid less and less attention to why the fights were happening and just wanted more fights. You need to have a reason to have the fight and a reason for it to matter. Look at the fight with Jax. And I picked this one because of Filmento's emphasis on it. It is an encapsulation of everything wrong with some of the narrative interactions between the fight scenes and the story itself. Now, it has narrative significance in that it will blast Jax's arms off and leave him to become Mecha Jax. Yes, like Filmento said, this is to make him more like his video game counterpart, but it's also to give us a cool fight. But part of the problem is there is no reason for Jax to have that fight with Sub-Zero in the first place. He's already got Cole and they're driving away, and he stops the car and says, all right, you go on, I'll handle this. Cole says we can beat him together, even though even together they wouldn't stand a chance. and then he gets convinced to drive away. Jax faces Sub-Zero and predictably has to eventually face him hand to hand and gets defeated with his arms ripped off. My goodness, they didn't even give us a half-assed reason for Jax to get out of the car. If they just had Sub-Zero create a wall of ice in front of the car at one point and Jax go, he's not going to let us get away unless one of us distracts him. And then he points out to Cole, I've got the Mark II, he'll come after me. That at least gives him something to sacrifice, but I would like to take it one step further and go, let's rework that entire scene so that Jax has a narrative reason to fight, and it doesn't seem completely stupid or suicidal, or even involve a wall of ice. Let's say that Jax successfully has rescued Cole at the diner and they're driving away and he goes, that guy's never going to stop hunting you, but don't worry, we have a way to solve this. And Cole goes, we? Turns out there's an entire Special Forces team where Cole is, and they have tracked Cole in order to trap the man who's been hunting other fighters with the dragon mark on them. So what Jax does is he drives Cole to the trap, gets Cole separated from his family. So they take the family into protective custody, but Cole has to stay with the Special Forces in order to be bait for the trap. And they tell him, don't worry, we'll look after your family. We're going to hide them where no one can find them. You can't go with them because you have the mark, and they're tracking that mark. So this is the safest way for both you and your family. Therefore, Cole is not abandoning his family to go find answers. He's being separated from them to protect them and stop this guy who's hunting them. So Cole's actions make much more sense. Also, Jax's apparent suicidal charge against Sub-Zero is actually a cunningly prepared trap. And we have a whole Special Forces team here to take down a superpowered character. And they've brought equipment to be ready to do that. They think they understand how to beat Sub-Zero's ice power, and they have the equipment to thwart it. Very much akin to Predator 2, when they've already surmised the Predator uses infrared, and they have saturated the place in particles that will make infrared useless. The team has prepared, as the Special Forces are known to do, for the scenarios they think they could face from Sub-Zero. This is also where we'll meet Sonya. She's a part of the team that's ready to catch Sub-Zero. If you want to even hint that other Lin Kuei are hunting these fighters who have the Dragon Mark, you could have one of the team members as an offhand say, well, we have the equipment to trap the one that turns into smoke, we've got the equipment to stop the one that uses fire, turns out we're working with the ice one, so we'll break out this shit. This would also indicate that the Lin Kuei are being used as assassins by Shang Tsung as an organization, and he's been using humans to hunt humans to skirt the rules. A tidbit that a Mortal Kombat player might notice, but need not be explained to a moviegoer. You don't need to waste the time. So they plot the trap for Sub-Zero, and unfortunately Sub-Zero, as a frickin' ninja, turns the tables on them and starts killing the Special Forces operatives one by one until it's just Jax, Sonya, and Cole. And even together, they seem no match for Sub-Zero. Now you could have this work in one of two ways. Jax will sacrifice himself so the other two can escape in a situation where they've clearly lost control, or we can have Jax pulled from the brink of death by our two other heroes, dragged into a car, and they barely get away from Sub-Zero just in time. Next, you have Sonya and Cole, who are traumatized by this event and fully realizing just what kind of shit they've gotten themselves mixed up in, return to Sonya's hideout. Cole wants to go see his family, and Sonya tells him, look, you can't. That thing's chasing you, and taking you to them would only lead him to that, and he's got a history of going after families. This is the only way. We can also see Sonya's human side in that she's reacting to the loss of all of these close friends. And this could also be a wound Kano can poke at to establish a firm enmity between them. In the film, he's just so derogatory and awful that she gets annoyed with him. But here we can make it hurt really early on when he realizes upon meeting her and just her or seeing the injured Jax that all the others are probably dead. And he goes, oh damn it, I wanted to kill them. So did they scream? He could even joke that he knew they had families that are going to mourn them and make wah-wah noises. We can display his full callousness to Sonya and make her want to murder him, but she doesn't because he's a prisoner in her custody and she values the strict code she has. This shows not only that she's a warrior, but someone who honors the rules of engagement. That prisoner is her responsibility no matter what. This also gives her a firm reason not to be willing to kill him to take that mark off of him, which would honestly be the logical choice. A human life, even that ratbag human life, is still valuable to her. Ta-da! We have already fixed the Jack scene, perhaps improved the Kano-Sonya interactions, and established Sub-Zero is even more of a badass. And you know what? No one had to look stupid to do it. You could even use the scene to build up Sonya's resourcefulness, or show us that Cole is a good guy and that he escapes from the situation but runs back in to save at least one of the Special Forces soldiers. Anything to build up our characters through action. We can make this work. We can save Cole Young from the scrappy heap. We can make these characters' choices matter. Yes, we can. Yes, we... well, they've already written it, so no, we can't. The games already had a reason for Kano and Sonya to hate each other. The movie doesn't use that reason, so it has to build up its own, and it never really does this other than his betrayal mid-movie. Which means all of their strife and interaction between each other, including a fight where you know nothing's going to happen, has no meaning. If the movie had been more like the games, it could have solved this problem. Instead, it's not willing to. It doesn't trust its source material. So I find this narrative problem is because it's not willing to work with that source material. Yeah, it's willing to give Kano his fatality. That's nice. But it drops those tidbits so you don't have to worry about what's actually missing from the game's representations. And this is a problem that haunts all of the characters, not just the one they've done best, Kano. Kano's presentation in this movie is still phenomenal. I'm going to take the time to learn Kano in Mortal Kombat 11 now. Even though he wasn't one of my mains, I'm going to do it just because I loved this movie incarnation of him so much. I am going to learn that mofo. This Kano made me question my heterosexuality just like The Rock does. So, with all these negatives, I want to point out that there are many things to enjoy in this movie. And just take a breath from all this negativity and go, there were still things that were a lot of fun. Think of Kano. Happy thoughts. Kano. Okay. Back to criticism. Leaving Kano behind and moving to the other villains, who were treated like shit. This is especially a problem since it's an invasion story, and therefore the story is driven by the antagonist. There is an aggressor, and the aggressor's reasons dominate the entire narrative, or they should in an effective aggressor story. In this case, virtually none of them have any personality besides Sub-Zero. Shang Tsung? I looked at that actor's IMDb page. He's got some credentials. He could be good. He's not in this one. He has nothing to work with. And it goes downhill from there. These characters are given virtually no time to develop and no real interesting character traits. A movie that should be driven by its villains, defined by its villains and cool fight scenes, pays them no attention. And this is, again, a fault of the movie side of the equation, not the video game side. Because in the video game, all of these characters have clear personalities, clear ambitions, and clear traits and fighting styles that you could use to improve your movie. It's the fact that it doesn't trust this that becomes a defining feature of its failures. And let's go into how trusting the source material, or at least being willing to use it or tweak it when necessary, could have improved this vision. And again, I mean this as part of improving that whole movie, and in countering Filmento's argument that it's the fact that it's a video game movie and they're too focused on the video game that becomes its principal flaw. I'm arguing it's not enough of a video game movie to excuse it not being as good of a movie as it could have been. And the warning signs are all over the place. Whenever the creators of a movie spend a lot of time talking about something, like, oh yes, we wanted to make sure we captured the style and soul of it well, and then the next interview has them say the same thing, and then the next interview has them say the same thing, I start to go, why do you feel so much need to cover the same point over and over and over again? Is it because you didn't actually do this and you're trying to cover your butts? It's like the guilty person who goes a little bit too far in protesting their innocence. But let's look at the first few villain scenes and apply some traits of these characters from their previous source material to help improve these scenes. So in one scene, we have Shang Tsung go, "The prophecy is upon us, and we need to prevent there from being a tournament." Sub-Zero is the one listening to the villain pontificate, and he goes, "Sure, I'll kill them for you. By the way, don't call me Bihan, I am Sub-Zero." And then Shang Tsung sends him out to go assassinate the Warriors of Earth. And then we have another scene where Shang Tsung is walking along the Badlands of Outworld, and Mileena walks up looking bored as shit and sounding bored as shit and goes, "Hey, maybe we should be worried about the Elder Gods and things like that." And he goes, "Nah, no reason to worry about these Elder Gods. It'll be fine. Send the reptilian thingy." And then they keep walking. Okay, then we get the introduction of some of our other baddies, where Mileena, Reiko, and Cabal are walking across a bridge, and Nitara flies overhead and then lands, and he goes, "Nitara, great huntress, isn't she? And she hot." And Cabal cracks a few jokes and introduces that he knows Kano. Reiko just stands there like a clod, and Mileena still looks frickin' bored. Then Goro appears. Well, he doesn't actually appear because we're trying to build up some excitement for him. But there's nothing there that makes this all that imposing. And Shang Tsung just goes, "Hey, it's an honor to have a Shokan here. All right, moving on. Let's go invade." So we've got all of these characters, and only one really got developed, and that was Cabal, because he told some jokes and acknowledged he knew Kano. So we get some backstory, we know his attitude, he's got a nice design, and a fun voice that fits him. So Cabal is the only one that comes out of this with anything at all resembling characterization. The rest of it is people standing talking. And I don't know about you, but this is boring in Greek theater, much less Mortal Kombat. So what if I told you that in one scene we could do almost all of this shit and more? Let's jump away from this to this same Outworld image and picture this. You have giant, beefy, brutish-looking General Reiko sitting across from Shang Tsung, and they're playing a chess-style Outworld game called Conqueror. The name has no significance. And all around them are Shang Tsung's attendants, and we get this feeling of decadence amidst the ruins of the Badlands of Outworld. So we're treated to a juxtaposition of the finery on these two characters, while everyone else around them suffers. There's that debauchery teamed with this abject poverty and misery. In short, it's L.A. Shang Tsung and Reiko exchange some pleasantries while they're playing, perhaps take a snipe or two at each other, and Reiko acknowledges, "Hey, the tournament's getting started. When are we going to prepare?" Shang Tsung shrugs and goes, "Well, there's not going to be a tournament," and that he's already dispatched agents to eliminate the Earthworlders. Perhaps Reiko makes a joke about one of them being an Earthworlder, Bihan, and Shang Tsung goes, "He no longer goes by that name. He's truly one of us. He is Sub-Zero now." Indicating that there is some significance to Sub-Zero's name change instead of him just saying that. It's not quite the same thing as it being a name that gets passed down the line from generation to generation like it is in the games, but since this Sub-Zero is ultra old, this will work as good as any other reason. Reiko will announce his displeasure at Shang Tsung's cowardly ways, believing the sorcerer has chosen subtlety over force, when force is the ultimate arbiter of things. Shang Tsung might make a jibe about a general not valuing the mind and deceit enough. Right then, Reiko places one of his pieces and defeats Shang Tsung at the chessboard, or conqueror board, demonstrating that he is not some giant oaf and that he's actually intelligent enough to be the general. And he'll give some sort of line about how, he values trickery well enough. And it's at that point in time we notice that some of Shang Tsung's attendants and guards are choking. It turns out that Reiko is making his move to seize control of the operation from Shang Tsung, and he has poisoned the warriors of Shang Tsung, or maybe his own soldiers start murdering Shang Tsung's. Shang Tsung, of course, can remain cool as a cucumber despite the apparent betrayal happening, and as Reiko points out that he's now going to kill Shang Tsung and usurp his position as the head of the tournament and Shao Kahn's champion, taking all this glory for himself, Shang Tsung laughs it off. It is then he unleashes his right hand, Goro, who walks into all this mess, defeats Reiko's warriors and Reiko himself, and then beats Reiko into submission, forcing him to bow in front of Shang Tsung, who makes it clear, I can use you, or I can take your soul now. Will you submit to me? And then he'll force Reiko's oath of allegiance. So here, we have managed to establish what Shang Tsung's plan is. We've established that he is working for someone else, and that their system is a brutal meritocracy built on backstabbing and violence more than anything else, and that Shang Tsung has a rival, Reiko, who is also his underling. We've also established Reiko's intelligence and dangerousness, while at the same time establishing Goro as the top dog of all, and why Shang Tsung is so confident. So we establish Goro, we establish Sub-Zero, we establish Reiko, and we establish why Shang Tsung should be feared, while giving you a wider socio-political view of Outworld, and no one's just standing around. Shit is happening. We have managed to help these characters be something more. And Sub-Zero wasn't even in the scene. You want to perhaps do even more here? How about this? How about Melina's also in the scene and off to the side, admiring herself in the mirror and making childish jokes and giggling madly when people are poisoned? When Reiko attempts to get her to assist him, or when Shang Tsung asks whose side she's on, maybe she'll cackle and make a joke about just watching things happen. Here we can demonstrate that she's sort of aloof from it all and chaotic and dangerous. Or maybe she'll make a joke about eating the fallen and not help anyone. Maybe she'll take a side in all of this. Hell, maybe Shang Tsung's warriors, all of them, can defeat Reiko's minions and force his submission, allowing us to show them all to be badasses. Any of these things would have been better than people standing around, and all of them would have honored the character traits in the video game. Make Melina chaotic, make her have that childish energy, make her crazy, make Reiko also a schemer. He seduces Melina in the comics, and he has clear ambitions and aspirations in the video games to Shao Kahn's throne. He is not a dumb brute. He's big, he's powerful, but his mind is one of his most dangerous parts. He's Shao Kahn's general, for goodness sake. And why not establish Goro as a threat and a key player here? We have managed to build up these people and establish some of their key personality traits. Goro's brutishness, Reiko's canny and treacherous nature, and Melina's madness all at the same time. And we've made Shang Tsung look like a prepared son of a bitch who already knew that Reiko was going to betray him. And you know what? We can do it in one scene. One scene. Now, of course, you want to refine the dialogue, make it all work, but come on. Maximum effect for minimum effort. That way, when you put all your effort in, you get even more effect. Use what is in the video games to your advantage as substance more than just style. But don't forget the rules of good writing. Use them. Oh my goodness, make sure to do as much as you can in each of these scenes. Don't have Sonya just explain things to our character. Have him earn those answers and receive them in an interesting way. Have things happen in the story. Don't just have people talk. It's an action movie. It should have action. And that shouldn't just mean fight scenes. It should mean characters doing things that show us who they are. And that, I think, at the core, is what holds the Mortal Kombat movie back. They're going through the moves lifelessly at times. It doesn't buy into what it should be. It needs to go all out, and it needs to care about why its characters fight, not just that they fight. So in some ways, I agree with Filmento. In others, I have to completely disagree. But I hope that in some way, shape, or form, this gives you an idea of where my head is at regarding the whole thing. I wish you all very well, and thank you for listening.